Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from St. Augustine, Doctor of the Church, while we read his book, Confessions. Welcome, Catholic pilgrims. We have 2 more readings from Book 4, and since time is precious and this is a little longer reading, let's get started. We are reading from Book 4, Chapter 15, on page 85. But I still did not see that the pivot upon which this important matter turns is the fact that it is all of your making, Almighty God, for you do wonderful deeds as none else. My thoughts ranged only amongst material forms. I defined them in 2 classes, those which please the eye because they are beautiful in themselves, and those which do so because they are properly proportioned in relation to something else. I drew this distinction and illustrated it from material examples. I also gave some thought to the nature of the soul, but my misconception of spiritual things prevented me from seeing the truth, although it forced itself upon my mind if only I would see it. Instead, I turned my pulsating mind away from the spiritual towards the material. I considered line and color and shape, and since my soul had no such visible qualities, I argued that I could not see it. I loved the peace that virtue brings and hated the discord that comes of vice. From this, I concluded that in goodness there was unity, but in evil, disunity of some kind. It seemed to me that this unity was the seat of the rational mind and was the natural state of truth and perfect goodness, whereas the disunion consisted of irrational life, which I thought of as a substance of some kind, and was the natural state of the ultimate evil. I was misguided enough to believe that evil, too, was not only a substance, but itself a form of life, although I did not think it had its origin in you, my God, who are the origin of all things. I called the unity a monad, a kind of mind without sex, and the disunion a dyad, consisting of the anger that leads to crimes of violence and the lust that leads to sins of passion. But I did not know what I was saying, because no one had taught me, and I had not yet found out for myself that evil is not a substance, and man's mind is not the supreme good that does not vary. Crimes against other men are committed when the emotions, which spur us to action, are corrupt and rise in revolt without control. Sins of self-indulgence are committed when the soul fails to govern the impulses from which it derives bodily pleasure. In the same way, if the rational mind is corrupt, mistaken ideas and false beliefs will poison life. In those days, my mind was corrupt. I did not know that if it was to share in the truth, it must be illumined by another light, because the mind itself is not the essence of truth. For it is you, Lord, that keep the lamp of my hope still burning and shine on the darkness about me. We have all received something out of your abundance, for you are the true light which enlightens every soul born into the world, because with you there can be no change, no swerving from your course. I was struggling to reach you, but you thrust me back so that I knew the taste of death, for you thwart the proud. And what greater pride could there be than to assert, as I did in my strange madness, that by nature I was what you are? I was changeable, and I knew it. For if I wanted to be a learned man, it could only mean that I wanted to be better than I was. All the same, I preferred to think that you too were changeable rather than suppose that I was not what you are. This is why you thrust me back and crushed my rearing pride, while my imagination continued to play on material forms. Myself, a man of flesh and blood, I blamed the flesh. I was as fickle as a breath of wind, unable to return to you. I drifted on, making my way towards things that had no existence in you or in myself or in the body. They were not created for me by your truth, but were the inventions of my own foolish imagination working on material things. Though I did not know it, I was in exile from my place in God's city among his faithful children, my fellow citizens. But I was all words, and stupidly I used to ask them, if, as you say, God made the soul, why does it err? Yet I did not like them to ask me in return, if what you say is true, why does God err? So I used to argue that your unchangeable substance, my God, was forced to err rather than admit that my own was changeable and erred of its own free will, and that its errors were my punishment. At the time when I wrote the book, I was about 26 or 27 years old. Sweet truth, although I was straining to catch the sound of your secret melody, I deafened the ears of my heart by allowing my mind to twist and turn among these material inventions of my imagination. As I pondered over beauty and proportion, all the time I wanted to stand still and listen to you and rejoice at hearing the bridegroom's voice, the voice of the bridegroom of my soul. But this I could not do, because the voice of my own error called me away from him, and I was dragged down and down by the weight of my own pride. You sent me no tidings of good news and rejoicing, nor did my body thrill with pride, for it had not been laid in the dust. If you struggle to believe in the spiritual realm of reality, you are going to have a really hard time correctly conceptualizing God. Not that God can be fully understood, but you won't even come close. You will, in fact, come up with something like a sky god, or Zeus who lives in the clouds up on Mount Olympus. If you will only allow yourself to acknowledge the material world, well, things are going to be difficult for you, and your only conception of God is something material. This is why atheists always are asking us to go find our God up in the sky, up on the mountain. They just don't get it. But for these people, there will always be a conflict within, because every materialist I've ever heard of believes in the metaphysical world, meaning those things that are a part of our reality, but that we can't materially find, such as time, space, knowing, being, thoughts, dreams, the soul being what makes you who you are. We see St. Augustine talking today about how much of a struggle he was having because his, quote, thoughts ranged only amongst material forms, unquote. He gets the soul wrong. He gets evil wrong. He tries to turn evil into a substance of some kind in order for it to make sense to his materialist mind. And what we see here is that St. Augustine is trying to work things out in his mind. He hasn't really yet had a Christian teacher, so the truths that he so desperately wants to know, he hasn't had the right guide yet. I'm betting we're going to get that with St. Ambrose. But anyway, we see him trying out all these ideas and imaginations in his own mind, but none of them work. And he kind of knows it subconsciously, but we see here that he realizes just how way off base he really was. And this is something for us to remember when talking with people who may not have ever really encountered theology or the spiritual world. We have to walk them through these things slowly and clearly and be patient with them as they try to work it out in their minds. If they are truly seeking to find the truth, truly, God will find ways to lead them to it. He really will. It may be a rough path, as we see here with St. Augustine, but they will get there if they truly desire to find the truth. We just have to be ready if they should happen to meet us along their path. We will stop here for today, Catholic Pilgrims. Tomorrow is our last reading from Book 4, but until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.